It was more like just we would just drum together and everyone, and even if people didn't really understand what it was doing, we would call it like it really affected our heartbeat. It felt like all of our heart rates were like synchronizing or something.
No,
So
I completely understand because actually at my school, NUHS, a clinic on Thursday, like afternoons afterwards, we would just kind of also do a drum circle sound bath to kind of like
so
purge all that, and the effects are immediate.
You're listening to the Applied Natural Medicine podcast, showing how the science of naturopathic, integrative, and functional medicine is applied by clinicians in real world practice. This is a production of NDNR, publishers of the Journal of Applied Natural Medicine since 2005.
Welcome to today's Applied Natural Medicine podcast. I'm joined today by Dr. Tanvi Gandhi, NDLAC, a certified integrative psychiatry provider. We have a teenage patient presenting with anxiety, another one presenting with insomnia, another one maybe with ADHD type symptoms. Others are dealing with perfectionism, social stress, and burnout. Now, many adolescents today aren't necessarily suffering from a deficiency of medication. Many have tried them and oftentimes may find that they aren't really solving the issue. They may be suffering from deficiencies of regulation, connection, meaning, and safety. So, how do we help young people build resilience in a world that seems increasingly dysregulating? So, today we're going to be discussing integrative psychiatry, narrative medicine, sound healing, and adolescent mental health with Dr. Tanvi Gandhi. Welcome, Dr. Gandhi.
thank you so much, Dr. Kareem. I really appreciate your introduction.
My pleasure. So, integrative psychiatry, just briefly tell us what is it and what is it that drew you into integrative psychiatry?
So it's really like bringing in the understanding of, I would say, Eastern and Western, or just holistic approach. And
Hmm.
it doesn't mean just one way or the other. So I think
Hmm.
my training is in naturopathic medicine and acupuncture. And I did do a fellowship in integrative psychiatry, and this was through
Hmm.
Integrative Psych Institute in Colorado. A lot of most, I would say, most of my other fellows, they were psychiatrists, and some of
Hmm.
them were naturopaths, but most of, so it's about, I think it's blending in understanding of
Hmm.
the whole person. And I would say you can think of it as a functional way or
Hmm.
precision way too, like what is the root cause of the
Hmm.
mental health condition that is being presented, and really trying to understand it. And my focus has been on mental health since I started practicing, and I work at a psychiatric hospital too. So I do clinical work and then I have private practice. So it just made sense for me to pursue integrative psychiatry just because
Hmm.
I'm just working along with psychiatrists and psychotherapists.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, that makes total sense. And again, I think the whole realm of psychiatry, and of course, I conventional training went through conventional psychiatry rotation. The reality is, they have a very limited tool belt at their disposal. And in fact, really, it's been incentivized to a very kind of quick medication checking for key concerning labs. Very little opportunity or incentivization for more of that therapeutic approach and diving into the core issues that are oftentimes underlying the mental health concerns that they're dealing with. So what is it that you're seeing today regarding adolescent health that's changed the most over the last decade, and what concerns you the most when it comes to adolescent health?
I think, I mean, I feel like the COVID played a big role, but I think even
Hmm.
beyond that,
Yep.
I would say isolation. It's, I mean, we're seeing like the impacts of social media use, the screen time, but that was a way, I guess, in COVID, a lot of
Hmm.
teens and even children younger than teens were coping. And I feel like that's now we're also talking about artificial intelligence. I mean, that's the
Hmm.
next. So I think it's like, it's almost like taking it far from like connecting with
Hmm.
connecting with peers in a way. I mean, they're connecting, but they're connecting through screen. So I feel like
Hmm.
there is like this level of there's isolation, but also maybe that affects them how they relate to each other, and also understanding of themselves,
Hmm.
and having or bringing some sort of connection, whether it's connection to self and others,
Hmm.
can be really of value for adolescents.
Yeah, I think you brought up a lot of valid points there. And obviously, when it comes to adolescent health, and definitely, I think COVID was an accelerationist
Yeah.
aspect of what was kind of already
Already
underlying
happened.
the issues, that real epidemic of disconnection, of loneliness that people had. This really took it to the next level. And obviously, AI and the real repercussions, psychiatric repercussions of AI and AI psychosis are definitely concerning trends that are going to be really showing themselves, more in the long term. But I think that again, even we talk about just kind of the conventional psychiatric approach, and even just sort of within Western culture, there's been this hyper emphasis on hyper individuality, bootstrapping yourself,
Mhm.
and then kind of it's like, all right, if there's an issue, the issue is probably just due to some luck of the draw chemical imbalance, and you gotta do what you have to do. But then you get back on the wheel, you gotta get hustle, you gotta be more efficient, more effective, more, and it's just more and more and more. And I think one of the things you emphasize your article is sometimes actually we need a little bit less.
Yeah.
And this kind of, brings us into, the next topic, which is narrative medicine and the importance of stories. And narrative medicine is a concept that many clinicians may not have encountered. So, what exactly is narrative medicine?
Yeah, and that's, I know I mean, it is an emerging modality, but it's really
Hmm.
very ancient at
Hmm.
the same time. I think storytelling has been the basis, or I guess the foundational aspect of medicine, even when, we're not talking about Western medicine, we're just talking about
Hmm.
medicine that indigenous people connected to, like sharing the stories and learning through stories, whether it's stories or myths. And narrative medicine is the idea of storytelling. It's like a creative self-expression as well, because the stories may not even be fully real or factual, because it's not really
Hmm.
about the the details. It's more about the process of storytelling or process of creative expression. And I do find and I do run those groups with teens, and I do that in one-on-one as well, and I find like I can see it brings joy, because it's not a direct way of, okay, what's going on with you? Obviously, that's part of the work that I do. But when I do narrative medicine group, it's more like, let's read a poem, and then let's read one line at a time, and then let's see what it brings up. So it's like an indirect way of storytelling. It's like what's going on within them, but also it's like a group activity, like they're understanding the poem and understanding what it brings up, like emotions, experiences, or even like how they relate to it. And I feel like that actually becomes a very fun experience, because
Hmm.
it's indirect, but it's creative, but at the same time it is clinical, and it can be very effective.
Now, especially with adolescents, it's like a time where they're really developing their identity and, shaping their own self-narratives. And especially maybe more so for, say, children of immigrants, or, immigrants
Mhm.
themselves who may have come from one culture and now they're experiencing a shift into another, where even the concept of identity, community may have shifted significantly. So talk a little bit about the importance of agency and identity in developing adolescence and how narrative medicine fits into that.
Think it really brings on self-reflection, but
Hmm.
because it's not really like, oh, you do, because it's not done in, it doesn't have to be done in a direct way. I feel like
Hmm.
it's a little bit non-invasive or gentle, and also
Hmm.
build empathy aspect of it, like empathy, whether it's towards themselves or towards others, which really is an important principle within narrative medicine. And we use the word bearing the witness or holding the space. So I think
Hmm.
when the stories are being told, again, whether there's own stories or when they hear other stories in that type of settings, I feel like it opens up. And a lot of times I think it's hard to engage. I think engagement with teens and children in first place, so doing it in a way that it's almost coming from a place of compassion and helping them connect to that compassion towards themselves, and then share the stories. I feel it just creates an opening, which is actually a term within narrative medicine we use. It's like you will find an opening or a clearing, which is like
Hmm.
something unleashed. And then, like you were mentioning, for the identity part of it, like what's happening with identity or even understanding themselves, whether it's working through different culture or is it a generational trauma and just collective things that are happening, collective stories in the world. So I feel like it helps address that, but in a creative and non-invasive way. And I feel like the compassion or just the idea of cultivating compassion and empathy is deeply rooted. It's like a very important principle in narrative medicine.
When we really think about this, I mean, we're addressing core determinant of people's health and experience. And you said about storytelling, I mean, it truly is like the most ancient part of the communal human experience. And whether it's mythology, scripture, or other stories, the point is that there were lessons of reflection,
Mhm.
archetypes that people can connect with, look up to, can kind of see the challenges that they're going through and find hope in that. And so I think that's very important. In addition, talk about some of the different methods like poetry or writing exercises. And it seems that an important part of this aspect of narrative medicine is that it becomes a way to experience rather than suppress one's
Mhm.
challenging experiences, possibly giving them an opportunity to even reshape their narrative, to process and transmute those emotional experiences while they're connecting at that community level, which again is an essential part of human health that we can't really separate. I mean, it's a bucket just like any of the other buckets. You might have breath work, you might have the supplements, you might have the diet, the sleep, the exercise, all of that. But if you're isolated and you're missing that connection bucket, doesn't matter how full or overflowing these other ones are, like there has to be something going in all of them. So I think that it's really a intelligent and intuitive way of kind of integrating the human experience in healing.
And sometimes it's like the insights that come through. I witness
Hmm.
that, and it's not quantifiable. It's not like I'm trying to collect data. It's just like you can really feel that in the space.
Hmm.
And it can be, I mean, the feeling of joy and connection, but it does something. And the insights that the teens share with me, like they're like, oh wow, yeah, I hadn't, it's like they can see that they haven't been, it's there, but they haven't really even experienced it. And it's like coming
Hmm.
through, and the way it's just the expression is really really powerful. And it also it's like neurodivergence, right? We talk about that it
Hmm.
can help, it can make everyone feel like they can work through it because
Hmm.
it's a creative way, and it's like it's open too. It's like it can be done in the methods can are very much like adaptable to what's going on with the person, or how they express, as they could write a poetry or they could draw. It doesn't have to be verbal either. So I
Hmm.
think that makes it really, I think it just makes it more accessible, and I feel like that's an important aspect in
Hmm.
narrative medicine too: accessibility to care, but also
Hmm.
accessibility to like receive. And I
Hmm.
feel like that, I find that it just makes it like more harmonized in the space, even if they're coming from different, neurodivergent spectrum.
Hmm. Now, you brought up a very good point of neurodivergence. And of course, in the neurodivergent community, ADHD, autism spectrum, we tend to also see that increase in mental health issues. And part of that has to do with kind of that nervous system. And even though we still don't have like a clear mechanistic tit for tat explanation of neurodivergence, autism, ADHD, typically there's this element of the nervous system being a little too sensitive, overtaxed in one way or another. We know that the neuronal pruning process tends to be disrupted
Mhm.
oftentimes in neurodivergence, and that can oftentimes be from some sort of trauma, be it, emotional, in utero, a toxin, infection, any number of things can potentially be that trigger that cellularly turns on that cell danger response, kind of keeps people stuck. And then when one thinks about that neural nets, it's like way that lack of pruning may make them more hypersensitive to certain environmental stimuli depending on where they're keyed. And so that's an important part of what you mentioned regarding different approaches and modalities that's most suited for that person's nervous system. And sound healing is kind of one of those areas which you made some very valid points about the type of sound because many people who are neurodivergent may have significant sensitivity to certain sounds. Tell me a little bit about how sound healing became a part of your integrative psychiatry toolbox.
Yeah, I would say sound and music just personally have been a big part of my own journey. And during naturopathic medical school, I did wrote my thesis sounds. I knew
Mm,
that there was something more that I wanted to understand or see how it's been, how sound is used like clinically. So a
hmm
lot of research on like just singing, just toning,
hmm
um, tuning forks with various frequencies, crystal bowls. So just I found so much research, but it was so it was interesting because it was very broad and also it was not as much US based research, but still it was very
hmm
promising that the sounds have been just in used in again in human experience, ancient culture, even sound is probably the most primordial form of medicine. I
hmm
think the instruments and indigenous people, how they connected with even just nature sounds. So I feel like I was
hmm
just so intrigued. And through my thesis, I just wanted to kind of move deeper into it, like actually for myself, but also how I could bring it to my patients. And I would do drum circles for my peers
hmm
in school, and it was more like just we would just drum together, and everyone, and even if people didn't really understand what it was doing, there was we would call it like it really affected our heartbeat. It felt like all of our heart rates were like synchronizing or something.
No,
So
I completely understand because actually at my school, NUHS, a clinic on Thursday, like afternoons afterwards, we would just kind of also do a drum circle sound bath to kind of like
so
purge all that. And the effects are immediate and like
yeah,
it's very noticeable. And it's very interesting because I even just came back from like a biohacking, beyond biohacking conference and a lot of different technologies, including, modalities that use sound for healing. And for those that, may not be aware, there's a plausible physiological mechanism behind this that, sounds are frequencies of vibration. Everyone's kind of tuned a little bit differently, just like different instruments have different tunes. And of course, the thing about the nervous system, especially, the vagus nerve stimulation, talk about polyvagal theory and the importance
yes,
of that. Pay attention to things like heart rate variability, the importance of that parasympathetic activation to kind of deal with the excess sympathetic stress. Can you just kind of like address a little bit about some of the physiology, physics behind sound healing, and some of the different tools that you have found to be very useful in that regard? Obviously, there's the tools of our own body. You mentioned singing, chanting, recitation. These are things that definitely acted from an internal level. But on that kind of exposure level, whether you're doing it as part of a community or, whether you're by yourself and you're listening to those type of sounds, tell us a little bit more about how that's conducive to healing and proper mental health.
yeah, absolutely. So I have used that both as in a one-on-one with patients or in a group. And it's it's again sometimes with especially with children and teens, I make it like almost like more nonverbal
Hmm
experience. So I would tell them to kind of get settled and stuff, but I don't really, it's like as soon as I start the sounds, I really start to notice like I
hmm
can physically see that their bodies, they're like more settled. They're not like moving around.
Fidgeting, yep.
And a lot of times they would actually they want to come and play the ball too. So that's very
hmm
interesting. And that only happens with children because I think it also creates it's that curiosity. It's
hmm
like, oh wow, this I think they're experiencing like something shifted, but they
hmm
it's like they can't really grasp it. So it's almost like it connects them physically, and I don't
hmm
impose it like come and play the bowls, but when they, and I think that's neurodivergence too, because something about sensory, like they're doing
hmm
it, it's almost like they're in control of it. So with
Yep.
with children, I just make it like, and they call it a sound lab. For some reason they
hmm
didn't want me to use the word sound bath, so they'll be, this is our sound lab, which also makes sense because they're like creating sound, they're experiencing sound.
hmm
So it's very much, I think the most important part is like kind of creating a space so they feel safe, which really goes back to polyvagal theory. Like safety is a key.
hmm
when the nervous system is feeling safe, even though intellectually they know they're safe, they're in a safe space, they know that they're getting this treatment, but it's like when their nervous system, when they can feel that safety, actually experience that safety, it really helps them drop out of that fight and flight. A lot of times there may be resistance in the beginning. It's like, what are
Mm-hmm.
we even doing? And that kind of breaks through as well. And half of, I would say 50% of time, children are asleep. Or I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even when I do with adults, it's like their nervous system is needing that deep rest. So it's like the
Mm-hmm.
sounds are just then become more like a background sounds, just like soothing sounds, but it's like they're not even fully at that point. Once they got into the state, they just fall asleep. So it's interesting again, with obviously what's going on with the patients, and but the intention is really like creating safety. And sometimes it's like I find it like with sounds it's easier because it's like there's no like even I don't, it's not like I'm guiding them in, it's just happening. And I feel like the resistance breaks a little bit easier than when I do some of the practices where I'm like guiding them into breathing certain way or tapping.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really powerful too, but I feel like they're just maybe more receptive to me not fully guiding them in and then like
Mm-hmm.
getting into that state.
Yeah, I think you make some very interesting points there. And it seems to be there's this trend, especially like the younger adolescents seem to definitely gravitate towards that sound and, even engaging curiosity in building and experimenting with the different frequencies. And I think that also kind of speaks a little bit even to the vitality of younger patients, where it's like
Yeah.
their nervous systems respond a bit more immediately, but it's kind of
Yes,
the more distunment we accumulated over the years, the harder it can be to shift into that. Furthermore, I
that's so
think there's
true.
that passive element of sound therapy, and in that you don't have to consciously engage to the same degree that you are with breath work. It's a much more passive relaxation into it. And like you said, a lot of times some of these patients may have trouble verbalizing, partly because of the weight of what they're dealing with. And I think it's a reality a lot of times with adolescents. I got an 11-year-old daughter. You ask about anything, and it's, I don't know. You're not going to get much
Yeah, that's mostly.
verbally out of them. But this is just a way to just kind of naturally tune their nervous systems. And I mean, this kind of brings up the clinical case that you wrote about, that 13-year-old, adolescent dealing with anxiety, trouble sleeping, and your use of sound therapy and helping them in their healing journey. So just briefly tell us about this patient case.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Same thing. The patient was extremely curious and also themselves
Hmm.
really into music, so it made
Yep.
it more receptive.
Hmm.
Um, and I was just helping. It was like just helping patient feel like they have like it's almost like it became like more like an empowering experience because as the patient was able to work through some of the anxiety, it was anticipatory anxiety of performance, and we were
Hmm.
focusing on that and how not just during the sessions the patient was open to doing something with the instrument that they were playing, or
Hmm.
also like using the voice before going into the experience of performance. Like it was really helping. So it was really nice because the patient was at I didn't have to like push it too much because it was like during the session, it was the patient felt so safe and comfortable that it kind of helped them continue on. So it became like a modality that patient really connected to. And I also I was doing the sounds with ear seating, so it was more like there was a physical experience too, where I would
Hmm.
press the ear seats. And while that's going on, patients hearing the sound from my crystal bowl and also the tuning forks, so I kind of made it a very integrative experience where the senses were engaged in many ways, which I find
Hmm.
for a lot of patients again with like that nervous system dysregulation, whether it's just like a self-created for to perform in certain way, or it's just that's how their brain is in that state from whatever reason that may be. So it was really, I think, engaging the senses. I feel like with this specific patient really helped. I also use sense at times too because every
Hmm.
time it was, I think because the patient was so sensitive to different things that I was like, oh, maybe we can introduce the scent as well to help them get to relaxed state. So it was part of the whole experience of various
Hmm.
modalities, but the sound was like a very important part of it because the music was important to the patient. And I just, that's was the reason I also chose that as a modality, because there was a high level of receptivity.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, definitely the stacking of the aromatherapy, I can see that helping. But again, you kept in mind the sensitivities of patients because not every modality is going to work the same way in each patient. And that kind of just a little bit more, curiosity about some of the sound healing modalities. Obviously, you talk about the sound bowl, which has, variable frequency and using tuning forks. Out of curiosity, what frequency tuning forks do you typically use? And is there a frequency you find more patients tend to respond to, or?
Again, with tuning forks, there's so many different types. Of course, the 473 hertz, which is
Mm,
close again to the earth frequency and to the healing frequency where cells heal. I have other set of tuning forks which are like element based, which I really like. So it says water, earth, air,
ooh,
space. So I use like
okay.
five elements in my practice a lot. So based on the person's constitution, I would use the
Hmm.
elements too, which I do end up using the earth element a lot, which makes sense because it with mental health and also like working with anxiety or just
Hmm.
like trying to ground and helps the patients feel safe. The earth
Exactly.
frequency works really well. And when I use earth frequency, I would the tuning forks, I would place them right by the soles of their feet. And I notice
Hmm.
instantly, like they come in, it's like coming into the body, which is
Hmm.
why that frequency is so powerful. Again, like it's so individualized based on what's going on. But I think I think 473 to
Hmm.
512 is considered that range where
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah, which is a most healing frequency. And then my bowls are tuned with like scales. So I have C scale, D, E, F, A, B. So musically, which also relates to the elements, I think, because the C scale is
Hmm.
earth element. Again, I end up using that a lot more, especially in the group, because of course, in the group, it's hard to fully know all the individual things that are going on. So it's more
Hmm.
like what is going to be the most harmonizing. So I usually start with C. I do play the other bowls too, but very mindful of the earth element. And then I would do D scale too, which is the water element, again,
Hmm.
soothing and grounding. And then I do use other frequencies as like added on, but the
Hmm.
bass, which is probably what it means in music language too, like using the bass to first like
Hmm.
settle everything and help everyone feel safe. And I feel like sometimes just that is enough or that is so powerful and then it can be added on. And a lot of times is I just get a sense of what's kind of happening in the group a little bit. And based on that, I would
Hmm.
modify it. And sometimes I just, like I said, just use the bass or the root scales or the earth frequency just because I think grounding has so much of value, especially
Hmm.
like helping connection to the body is such an important piece with mental health.
No, it's actually very fascinating. And, when you think about it, it definitely makes sense that a lot of mental health concerns, people are way too much in their own head.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm no exception.
Yeah, exactly.
And that aspect of the earth and grounding back into the body, as a way of signaling safety, getting out of that sympathetic overdrive and being able to use those frequencies, at that kind of root, which a lot of people are familiar with the chakra system in Ayurveda and importance of kind of starting from the base, working your way up. And I mean, even naturopathic medicine has this foundational, conceptually of those base kind of root aspects of our health, that are really kind of rooted in the earth from which we came. And of course, you mentioning water, which is of course the essential substance of life. So it's
Yeah.
really kind of fascinating how rooted these things are in the elements energetically and how they seem to kind of harmonize so well with our physiology. And I know that you mentioned some other tools. Was it Molina Monochord, which I had to look up. I'm
Yeah. So I
you know
yeah, that's a really beautiful instrument. And I did use that with this patient and I also use that in the group. It's interesting. So It's actually harp and sitar like instrument. It's
Mm-hmm.
obviously those instruments are humongous, but this is like just toned to the D scale, and it does have like
Mm-hmm.
you can play A and B, but it's mostly D. So I
Okay.
really use
And is that the
sometimes,
water scale again? The D
yeah,
scale?
again, it's the
Okay.
water
All
scale.
right.
And D also like it's water, it's emotions too. Like it's like
Mm-hmm.
what's happening like at an emotional level or feeling, which again makes sense with the roots. Like the root is the
Mm-hmm.
physical, and then you get to the emotional. And I feel like sometimes using those two scale help me bridge to ultimately I do like to play the heart scale, which is F. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
mindful of that too with anxiety or very sensitivity. I don't start there, but like getting into that space of compassion and kindness, which again is like once the root is like once we settle everyone, like that
Mm-hmm.
empathy or loving kindness is an important skill in DBT, which is
Mm-hmm.
used just whether it's self-compassion statements or just feeling empathy for others, or that it's like you start with yourself and extend it over. So that's kind of is always my intention, that we want to create that space where there is just compassion is like the heart of it is compassion, which is a heart chakra. But I just get there, but I don't usually start there because sometimes it can be too intense too. It's like if you're not grounded, then it can be just there's a lot of things that are being unleashed. So just mindful of that. Yeah.
No, that actually seems to be very sound wisdom. First, grounding in the roots, in the earth, in the element, stabilizing, getting into that water frequency of movement, of healing, kind of working your way up to those heart frequencies rather than kind of starting right at the top before you kind of tune the person to get into that.
Yeah.
And, this, of course, ties into, the various existing traditional forms, energy and holistic medicine, and gave a earlier nod to Ayurveda, which again, of course, is a traditional, healing system of the Indian subcontinent. And of course, it has parallels with other similar healing systems that kind of co-evolved and, may have shared a lot of their things, whether it's traditional Chinese medicine, Unani medicine that's based off
Mhm.
of Greek Hellenic medicine, and all these, look at the importance of, the elements and the associated energetic flow with each of them and stagnation. And in one of your writings, this kind of brought up a term that I wasn't familiar with beforehand, which is marma, and talk a little bit about how that tends to parallel a little bit with acupuncture, acupressure. So for clinicians unfamiliar with marma, like where should they begin?
It's yeah, really good point. So ma it's just it's so interesting. It's just exactly parallel to. So you would think of it as like the prana, where so
Mm,
prana is the energy or the life force, and
which
nadis are the
correlates to chi in traditional
exactly
Chinese
chi
medicine,
or
yeah.
ki, and then that the prana flows through nadis, and the
Mm,
points where we want to stimulate the prana in different parts of the body, which that would be marma points. So marma is really acupuncture, acupressure points on on the meridians, which are the
mm,
channels. So
okay.
very similar. There, I guess there is an understanding that some marma points were punctured, and there was some sort of a marma puncture in Ayurveda. It's
Hmm.
still, I think, a lot of texts and how things like change and evolve over. There's not that much data, but the marma points just by gentle stimulation, so just by pressure or even
Hmm.
placing oil, like oil, because the skin is the largest organ, and in
Hmm.
Ayurveda, oils are extremely
Yep.
important. So using marma on using oil on specific marma points can be really powerful. One of the simple ones, which I actually spoke at a conference in Connecticut earlier this year, is just placing oil in your belly button. It's like a
Mm.
really simple way to use the marma,
And
and
what kind of oils
it
typically?
can be castor oil, which we use a
Okay.
lot in naturopathic medicine applications, but it can also be sesame oil. It can also be coconut oil. Again, it depends on what's going on with the person. Castor oil is kind of neutral. It can be used with all doshas, but when it comes to Ayurveda, with specific dosha, you're using specific oils.
Hmm.
So that can be even more specialized. And or you can do use marma as like self like tapping, which is, again, tapping has so many implications and has benefits to like nervous system regulation.
Hmm.
And one of the ones that I use a lot in my practice is also the tip of the tongue to the roof of the mouth. So it's like an internal
Mm,
acupressure point, and you can actually tap on the right side and left side and really releases the tension in the jaw. Because
mm,
it's so internal, you can do it through outside too, but when you do that, it really, and that's one of the really important point in Marma. It's also used in like deeper meditation because if you're sitting in meditation and there is tension that builds up or it's hard to set, it's like that point is used to really help relax the jaw and relax the
mm.
muscles so you can really get into more deeper meditative states.
Gotcha. So Marma wouldn't technically be considered to be a submodality of Ayurveda. It's kind of more, it has an overlap and a little bit of a geographic overlap, both in the practice, but I guess you mentioned it's originally from Tibet and some of those other regions, or?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah, I think the whole Himalayas, so I mean, that really
Hmm.
includes the Ayurvedic, the Tibetan medicine, and then acupuncture, because I think even before acupuncture there were seeds and other things that
Hmm.
were used, and that's why ear seeding is so ancient. Like before
Hmm.
industrial revolution, before needles, I think it was all like different ways of connecting with body through this special points. So I feel like
Hmm.
oils, seeds, crystals, stones,
Hmm.
even in the in Mayan medicine, which I don't have an in-depth training, but I've done some work there. And the word is chilel. Chilel means like the energy life force. But how do you
Hmm.
stimulate chilel is through crystals and stones and flowers and oil. So it's very interesting. I just feel like the understanding of human body and where the energy points are, it's, of course there's a way to externally understand it, but it was so intuitive. And I, even though this cultures maybe did not fully directly communicate, like the Mayan and Indian, or the Mayan and the Asian, but there was a, it's like a very similar map
Yep.
of this channels, meridians, nadis.
A kind of a convergent evolution in terms
Yeah,
of, healing systems, even though these are geographically separated. And I do find
yeah,
that to be fascinating how these different cultures, there was definitely some diffusion probably took place, but Otzi, the ice from modern day Turkey, like they found on him, what appear to be, some acupuncture or type of needles as
yeah.
well for treating, different pain points he's dealing with. So it's definitely fascinating that, again, using the body and the different points of the body and different ways to support the body to kind of support overall physical, as well as mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say spiritual too, because I
Hmm.
think it, and where it's like not really separated. I think it's like such an integrated understanding. Like the body is the source of the spiritual
Hmm.
connection or self realization or self understanding. So that emphasis on the marma or the energy points really helps other like spiritual goals or just connection to the earth and the universe.
You made a very good point there about connection, which kind of brings us to one of our last points, the importance of connection, and building resilience in adolescence, and how community plays such an important role in mental health. So, can you speak a little bit to the importance of that community, that connection, and why group interventions are so powerful?
Yeah, I feel like the connection, which is like we were talking earlier, not just through screen, like screen, just for physical connection is so important. And that's why
Hmm.
when like there's something about bringing kids together in a group and just doing, even when we do just meditation, I just tell them to hold their palms on their heart and just feel. And even if they're not, even if intellectually it doesn't make sense, there is something that shifts in the space.
Hmm.
And the feedback that I get is like, oh, I felt so relaxed. And then everyone is feeling so relaxed. It's almost like they can see as they're getting engaged. It's like one person getting engaged, it's like has a whole effect on the,
Like a field
because they
effect. Yep.
feed off each other, even if they're so it's such a, I think, bringing to like intentional circles like that, like whether it's just meditation, mindfulness. I do a lot of tapping and loving kindness kind of practices. So again, and many times I bring up like even if you're having conflict with another person, we're still bringing that sense of compassion, and sometimes that feels like not, it may be not comfortable, but what it does is in that type of spaces, it opens up, it brings the healing. Because
Hmm.
as we know in adolescence, there is, they may feel like they're part of this group or they're part of that group. And it's just like opening some of the barriers to help them connect at a larger level. And I feel like compassion is probably the key to connection. And sometimes it's
Hmm.
not just a direct saying like, okay, you got to be compassionate. It's like, how can you like embody that? How do you feel that? How do you sense that? And I think that does help build resilience, because when there is more empathy, like things, there's so much that is like you we have to train ourselves, and I train my patients. Like there's some many things that you're just like, there's radical acceptance. Like there's things that are ongoing or that have happened. Like you're not trying to change that, but we're trying to help shift some of the perception by embodying compassion. And I feel like that is the key to resilience. So I don't know if I answered your question in
No,
a
no, I
direct
think that
way.
that's an important thing is that, being in community really allows that embodiment of compassion, and people are essentially being reflections of each other. And sometimes in isolation, it can be challenging to be able until you've really kind of done the work. But
Yeah.
even so, I think part of that work really requires a connection with that community. Even looking at, for example, the importance of group health settings, even from a functional medicine perspective, they're showing that it's very powerful because there's a shared experience. Whether you have people together for diabetes or for mental health,
That's so
there's
true.
going to be overlaps in the experience, and people kind of being able to share the tools with each other that they've also found to be effective and beneficial, and I think really playing a part in that healing process. So it's not just the patient on themselves, just a substance or this or that, or even relying on the doctor alone to kind of play that role of heal me. It's you're coming together as a community to heal, and it seems like that's where like the magic really happens.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, it builds resilience and also
Mm-hmm.
helps with compliance, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe people are more likely to, it's like self-care increases when you can see it's reflected in others. And I think
Mm-hmm.
children, especially, when they see their peers, it's like it becomes more cool. It
Well, it
becomes
becomes
more
almost like
exciting.
an accountability thing in a way where it's like
Yeah,
you kind of want to be there for everyone else and they want to be there for
yeah.
you. And I think that that definitely can play, a role in helping with adherence. We're getting close to the end here. So just like a couple, last minute questions. What would you say is probably one of the most overlooked and important contributors to adolescent anxiety? And how do you suggest we address that?
I do think like the connection and isolation is a big part of it. I feel like the not fully understanding like of what is, not fully able to express or understand. And
Hmm.
I think that's where the engagement piece comes through, because I think it's
Hmm.
hard when it's like you said, I don't know, that's like the answer comes up a lot. The children are, I don't know, I know it's like, but it's like, what is, how do you dig deeper to that? And I feel like
Hmm.
the engaging uh, teens in a creative way. I feel like I really think that can open the door. But it's like it's almost like meeting them where they are at, which is true for just an important principle in naturopathic medicine. You're not trying to force and impose, because otherwise it's going
Hmm.
to be seen as another authority, and it's going to
Yeah.
be a rebellion. So it's like, how do you meet? And I feel like meeting help in a creative way, like helping them creatively express, I feel like can be a key to that, and that can only help them understand themselves.
All right. You talked a little bit about vagus nerve exercises, such as, pressing roof of the mouth with the tongue. Is there any other simple vagus nerve exercise you think that every teen as well as adult should know to have in their toolbox that's easy to implement?
Yeah, the ears, like they are really, and now
Mm,
you may have heard of there's like tools that people place inside. It's a vagus nerve stimulator,
yep.
really just pressing on the top of the ear. And sometimes
Mm,
I tell with kids and even with adults, I tell them to just press the ears and like almost like massage it out a little bit because it emphasizes that point
mm,
zero, and then the points inside the ears and also the earlobe. So all those points on the ears and even behind the ears, just
mm,
accessible because you don't have to, it's not like you have to find different points. You just know and it's
mm,
easily accessible. And I do that sometimes with seeds or just tapping on the ears, also tapping
mm,
on the mastoid bone, which sometimes helps with when there's um panic, anxiety, and then there's vertigo and that balance coordination stuff that comes with anxiety sometimes. The mastoid bone, as it's like the part of internal like balance and equilibrium, that's a really good point. So all of those, I would say ears, if you can't really, for someone who is starting on this path and not fully knowing all the points, like it's just easier to access and work with, and easier to do it on children. And some of my patients say they do it on their pets too, and they love. I mean, everyone
mm.
loves maybe.
I mean, I know like my cats enjoy having their ears played with, and I mean, in acupuncture, I know that of course, like the entire homunculus is, you
Yeah,
know,
let's see.
the points are all there in the ear, and kind of makes sense. You're in your head. Why not get into your body in your head?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
it just kind
Yeah,
of seems like the first place to kind of get back in.
to
So,
address that. Yeah.
mm, no, that's fascinating. If there's one takeaway you want practitioners to bring from this conversation and implement Monday morning with their patients, what would that be?
I would say maybe, and we touched it just a little bit, helping maybe you're with a patient or in a group, just maybe closing your ears with your thumb and just humming. And I feel like it's
Mm,
such a, called a bumblebee breath or the humming practice, but something so simple again and accessible. I feel like children actually enjoy it a lot, but even
mm,
it's good for adults. It's just a way, I would say it just helps reset. So if someone's coming in
mm.
with a lot of stress, and even before talking about what their issues are, maybe you can help them just get to a reset state. They may think it's kind of a strange thing to do, but once they do it, they will know it's really effective.
Oh, that's wonderful. No, I think again, I'm all for tools that are easily accessible. As long as you still got a head, you've got those tools. So,
Yeah,
no,
and it's simple. It's free
yeah.
too, right? I think like you said.
And yeah, people need all those tools. I mean, like again, I'm all for, the greatest and latest technologies, but accessibility I think is essential, I think is key, and especially, for our adolescent health for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we discussed a lot of things today, and of course, the importance of healing and how it's more than just symptom reduction on helping adolescents reconnect to their story, regulate their nervous system, and build resilience, discover their own capacity for healing while connecting with each other, and just the importance of just sometimes slowing down through mindfulness, sound, creativity, or simple nervous system awareness and regulation. These approaches can offer adolescents very practical tools for navigating a world that often feels very overwhelming. So I just want to thank you again, Dr. Gandhi, for your work and for sharing that with us today and giving us a lot of these tools. It was a pleasure to have this discussion with you today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kandel. I really appreciate it.
Again, today's guest was Dr. Tanvi Gandhi, a naturopathic physician, licensed acupuncturist, and certified integrative psychiatry provider, also the founder of the Shiva Shakti Acupuncture and Ayurveda. And her work integrates mindfulness, sound healing, narrative medicine, acupuncture, and integrative psychiatry to support emotional well being across the lifespan with a particular focus on adolescents and young adults. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
This has been the Applied Natural Medicine Podcast, a production of NDNR, publishers of the Journal of Applied Natural Medicine since 2005. Access the full archive of case reports and clinical insights at ndnr.com. For subscriptions, partnerships, or submissions, contact us at editor@ndnr.com.